My name was Mark Stravinsky. As you can tell by the title of this post, I'm a killer, a criminal, and you probably think I'm a monster. I wouldn't argue with you. I've done terrible things to good people. I've helped evil people with their agendas, and I've ruined thousands of lives by doing so. Today, I'm coming clean. I'm admitting to the big crimes, murders, and conspiracies I've been involved in. I can't cover everything, as the entire list is quite extensive, and honestly, I probably don't remember all of it anymore. I've been doing this for quite a long time. Long enough to know that the bad guys get away with pure, unadulterated evil. I feel the need to issue a warning before I get into the details. What I'm about to tell you will not make you a happier person or make your life any better. You'll probably be labeled a conspiracy theorist nutjob if you ever talk about these things outside in the real world, but they need to be known. I don't give a fuck whether you believe me or not. These are things that I did, things that I saw. It's easy for you to just hear my story and outright deny it, but I can't just do that. I can't just click my fingers and make the last 20 years of my life disappear. With all that said, let's begin with who I was before I became an evil henchman. I had a fairly decent upbringing, but I was a failure in high school. I was one of those kids who were just passed along, putting in just enough work not to fail. My parents coddled me, and I became weak, lazy, and spoiled as a result. At 18 years old, I had no work ethic, no motivation, and no direction. Most of my time was spent hanging out with my friends, smoking weed, or watching TV. When I graduated, my parents wanted me to start thinking about my future seriously and threatened to kick me out if I didn't change. I didn't though, and the free ride only lasted a few months, most of it being spent fighting with my asshole parents. When they kicked me out, I realized how nice I had it there and regretted everything I'd done within just a few days. Sleeping on concrete can have a really sobering effect. My parents tried to contact me a few times after they learned that I was homeless, but I was done with them. They were dead to me. After applying to dozens of jobs throughout the city, I realized that nobody wanted to hire a hobo, so I did what any smart homeless person does. I enlisted in the military. I became an infantryman, and it looked like I had finally found a place I belonged. When I went to basic, I was a weak, lazy piece of shit, but by the end, I was a highly motivated badass. I honestly have no clue what changed me, but I graduated at the top of my class. I was like this entirely different person in just a few weeks. Shortly after that, I became an asset for the US military on the battlefield. I had the most confirmed kills in my company, and I quickly climbed the ranks. I was really surprised to learn I had a natural act for warfare. I remember one of the officers saying to me, "Son, a soldier like you comes along once in 100 years." I was ecstatic. Time practically flew by, and before I knew it, my time was up. I remember being in shock that 4 years had already passed. I planned on re-enlisting because there was nothing else out there for me in the world. It was just a few nights before I could fill out the forms to re-enlist when I was approached by some rather peculiar men. I could tell that they were powerful men by the way that the officers respected and almost seemed to fear them. They said they had a prestigious position available for me, and that because of my life circumstances, I was perfect for the job. Without a family and nobody outside of the military knowing I exist, nobody was better suited. The fact that I was good with a rifle didn't hurt either. I was also informed that if I accepted their offer, there would be no record of me having ever existed. Everything from my birth certificate and my military service would disappear. The thought of my military service being erased from the world made me cringe a little, but with everything taken into consideration, this was going to be one hell of a job offer, or so I thought. I later learned that these men were billionaires, high-ranking government and military officials, and some were even world diplomats. Before you get your tinfoil hats out, I feel the need to say that this wasn't the Illuminati, some Jewish conspiracy, or the lizard people, or anything like that. This was one of the networks of powerful sociopaths, yes, but there are hundreds of those networks. Most conspiracy theorists make the mistake of thinking there is one collective behind it all. There isn't. There are networks of powerful, evil people who partake in conspiracies for a number of reasons. Most of them are only out to make more money or to expand their business interests in general. There are a few idealistic networks that are attached to an idea, the most powerful, to my knowledge, being the globalists. The people who want to bring about the New World Order and become the governing force of the earth, thinking they and their descendants will be some benevolent line of elite leaders humankind would be lucky to have. Those are easily the most fucked up people I've ever worked for. I guess it just goes to show, just because you're an elite, corrupt billionaire doesn't mean you can't be crazy too. But more on them later. Something I feel I need to explain is the fact that this can all be pretty confusing. None of these networks have names. People are sometimes connected to multiple networks, and many of the networks have connections to other networks. But this first one that recruited me was one of the most powerful I've ever worked for. I mean, they bossed around the military. That should tell you all you need to know. Obviously, I accepted their offer. This first network was interested in world politics and corruption. They did their best to bribe and control politicians around the world, and they did a damn good job of it too. My mission was to assassinate a politician in New Zealand. They didn't tell me about the kind of operation they were running. In fact, most of them don't. The guy's name was Bruce Beetham. After funding Beetham's primary opposition and getting him voted out of office, he started to do some investigation into election fraud, amongst other things. I was also instructed to destroy any evidence of any wrongdoing against my clients. They gave me 10 grand up front to cover any expenses I had in order to complete the mission. I was promised 100 grand after the mission was completed. I was in New Zealand within a few days. I didn't want to bring a gun, considering their gun laws over there are fucking crazy, even back then. Instead, I brought a small dosage of ricin with me, and I knew that was all I was going to need. I began tracking him, studying his patterns, and things of that sort. I noticed that he must have been pretty comfortable because his security and safety precautions were pretty bare minimum. The guy didn't even have a house alarm. He just had a sign in the window that said he did. After 3 days of tracking him and noticing he seldom left his house, I set my plan in motion. It was the middle of the night, and he lived alone with his wife. With some state-of-the-art break-and-enter technology I now had access to, I broke into his house. I crept in as silent as can be. I made my way to their bedroom and began pushing the door open. It was an old house, and the door made the worst squeaking sound you've ever heard. I pushed it so slowly that at times I wondered if it was moving at all. But I knew that I had to remain patient. Then, in the pitch black room, I heard motion. It was him. He sat up. "Is anyone there?" he asked. I was mortified, terrified that my plans were foiled. It took everything in me to maintain my composure and sit there, silently, waiting, listening, watching. He must have sat up for 15 minutes, and it was excruciating. I knew I couldn't move, or he'd hear me. I was trapped there. Each second felt like an hour, but I sat still. When he finally laid back down to go to bed, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. From there, it was easy to walk over and place the small dosage of ricin into his mouth. Shortly after, I made my way to his office and destroyed every piece of paper in there. Mission accomplished. I spent the rest of my time there kayaking. 2 days later, it was announced that he died of a heart attack. It's funny, in a way. My clients, they controlled all the media over there, so no one even reported on his death despite being a prominent politician. To this day, the way he died isn't available to the public. A lot of what I know about this case was learned later. Back then, I made the false assumption that because this network was working with the American military, it was good and moral. Looking back, I can't believe how naive I was. Days later, I was on one of their private yachts discussing how they planned on paying me. The man I assumed was the leader went onto the lower deck to get the cash when I suddenly saw another man come out. He looked to be some kind of military personnel by his build. "Who are you?" I asked. He responded by pulling a gun out of his jacket and firing at me. Luckily, I was quick enough to dodge the bullet by landing on the floor. He continued firing at me with his semi-automatic, but I pulled out my gun and shot him in the head. I knew that I was in danger and jumped off the yacht and swam to shore. Thankfully, I was covered by the darkness of the night. I later pieced together why they kill the men they hire. They can't afford to let their secrets get out. They can't afford to suppress information like this. The more I thought about the people involved in these conspiracies, the more it made sense. I remember how Lee Harvey Oswald was dead not too long after killing JFK. And the man who killed Oswald, Jack Ruby, was dead not too long after that. Not to mention you get government reports proposing magic bullet theory. Everyone just turned a blind eye to the fact that there was more than just one shooter that day. It's weird. There's enough evidence to say something fishy was going on, but not enough to say by who. The people chalk it up to be some grand coincidence. I've been in this line of work long enough to know that there are no fucking coincidences, especially not in politics. But before I get too off topic, let me continue my story. After I got back home, which was a shitty motel room now, I wondered what the hell I was going to do next. I can't go back into the military because those fuckers would find me there. I can't even apply for a job because, on the books, I don't exist. They erased everything about me, and it was smart of them to do it that way. When they killed me, nobody would have known except them. Luckily, I survived. There were a few months there when I was completely lost. I had no hope, no idea what to do next, and I was running out of money. Luckily, in the motel, I overheard a conversation that was life-changing to me. I overheard a few men talking about something called the Onion Router. As you all know, this was the early development of Tor, which granted access to the deep web. I was one of the first people on there, and I guess you could even say I was one of the first hitmen on the deep web. I didn't plan on becoming a hitman, it just sort of happened. I paid the motel enough to cover me for the next few months, and took what was left of the money and purchased a laptop. On this laptop, I familiarized myself with the deep web, the kind of business that was conducted there, and the kind of people who lurked about, looking for people like me. I'm sure these evil networks existed for hundreds of years and have been finding hitmen by other means for a long time, but I'm sure the deep web really sped up the process. Also, remember that this was the original deep web, before it became a watered-down pop culture genre. This was when actual criminals went on the deep web. When the deep web was for criminals, by criminals. The deep web became pure cancer after 2013, and still remains that way to this day. Well, anyway, in December, I was on the deep web looking for any kind of a job. Morality meant nothing to me. I just needed to do something to make enough money to feed myself. I still remembered being homeless and sleeping on the streets. I would have done everything in my power to prevent that from happening again. I came across someone who was offering $150K to assassinate some singer. I responded to the offer and heard back from them immediately. They told me they had to vet me before they gave me the rest of the details. The person who hired me was rich. The house they brought me to was enormous. I almost couldn't believe my eyes. After they vetted me, I demanded they pay me in advance. I learned my lesson from last time. They agreed to do so and filled me in on the rest of the details. I was instructed to assassinate Sonny Bono. Prior to this assignment, I had no idea who the hell he was, but after doing some research, I discovered that I'd gotten myself into something serious. I didn't want to turn down the job, mostly because I didn't want to make someone that rich hate me. I agreed to the job and set out to get my target. After doing some digging, I discovered that he was vacationing in State Line, Nevada for a few days. I located him and rented a hotel room not too far from his. I watched him for a few days, waiting for my chance. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. On the way there, I had purchased a gun, but this was a populated area, and going to prison was not going to be in my future. One day, as I was thinking about how I was going to kill him, I saw that he was going skiing, alone. That couldn't have happened at a better time for me. I gave him a couple minutes to go before me and followed after. I hadn't been skiing in a long time, and I was nervous about having to kill him in that situation. I knew he was an experienced skier, but I took my chances. I knew it was the best way for me to do it. After he'd begun down the hill, I went quickly thereafter. After catching up to him, I thought about pulling out my pistol to shoot him, but the trees we were gliding right past seemed to be enough to take care of the job. I inched my way closer and closer, and then I pushed him with all my might and almost lost balance myself. My client had already informed me that he had contacts in the FBI and the media, so nothing suspicious would ever be reported. After that, I started to really enjoy the corrupt work I was doing. There was some strange satisfaction I took in helping these people. Well, after that one, I found a rather interesting offer when I was back searching on the deep web. Someone was offering hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual pay to kidnap young women alive. In retrospect, it should have been obvious what these girls were going to be used for, but at the time I just didn't think about it. When someone is offering to pay you $600,000 a year, the gray area seems to expand. But I did as I was told, kidnapping and later disposing of hundreds of young girls, mostly between the ages of 12 and 14. Those were the desirable ones. After kidnapping them, I deliver them to a boat and then to an island off the coast of Italy. I have spent quite a bit of time there, enough to know that there are quite a few elites from across the globe who frequented this place. From popular politicians to actors to bankers, they couldn't get enough of this place. Thankfully, when word of the island reached the public, I was able to distance myself from the entire thing and avoid any jail time. My client, being the wealthy bastard he is, bought his way out of any serious jail time too. After I heard the news, I kinda chuckled to myself. It really goes to show that we do live in an oligarchy. I continued to work for him on and off for many years. It's been a few months, but I'm sure he'll contact me again soon enough. You see, I've participated in hundreds of these kinds of things. I'm involved in the deaths of Bernie Grant, Ivor Hansen, Pierre Charles, Marcia Stanescu, Jesse Helms, and many, many more. Look it up, see for yourself how many of these people died, and tell me it isn't suspicious. I have a feeling that my clients will continue to do these things until the end of time, and they'll never be stopped. In July of 2016, I was hired by a powerful political organization that I frequently worked for. Over the years, I'd gained their trust and assisted in many assassinations, amongst other things. I was hired to make a leaker disappear. Despite my client's connections with local and federal law enforcement, the murder has become something of a popular conspiracy theory. One that people are very interested in figuring out once and for all. This is the first time there's ever been such widespread interest, at least with this client. This has caused me to lay low. I'm currently in South America, waiting for the fire to put itself out. Soon enough, people are gonna forget about the whole thing. They're gonna forget it ever happened, just like they always do. But this isn't necessarily my reason for making this. I'm putting this out there because it's time my clients paid for what they've done. I'm already a millionaire after having worked for them for so long. I've made my money, but now I'm done. I want you, the people, to know the fucking truth. I want you to know what they've done. And another thing. Who the fuck are you? Thank you so much for watching. Consider joining the Dark Circle on Patreon. If you donate $1 a month, you can get every story narration in MP3 format amongst other things. Also, feel free to support the channel by checking out the Teespring store or ordering my book. Thank you so much for your support, and don't forget to keep it creepy.